Hi, everyone, and welcome to the triumphant return of Ektron Office Hours after a 3-week hiatus. Happy to be back, and I'm really excited about the topic today because it's something that I had wanted to learn for a long time, finally got to play around with a little while ago, and that is MVC with Ektron. And to provide a lot of perspective on that, I've got Kurt Wiersma, who is with the, I'll let you introduce yourself, but if you have any questions about Ektron and MVC as we go through this, feel free to post those on Twitter using the Ektron OH hashtag, or if you just have general questions about Ektron or about the web in general, feel free to post those as well. We'll answer them live as quickly as we can. So, Kurt, with that, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Great, thanks. Hi, my name is Kurt Wiersma. I work for the American Academy of Neurology. We're a professional association for neurologists based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been working with Extron for a little bit more, well, probably like a year and a half so far. We launched our new website, AN.com, about almost exactly a year ago, actually. And we worked with implementation partner C2, and we built out the site using Microsoft's MVC framework, and that's what we'll kind of be talking about in this session today.
All right, and we've got our regular crew here. So, Brad, you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. I'm Brad Steele, Development Manager with Experis, and you're currently looking at my view.
All right, and Jay, Jay, you took off the graphic you had, but all right.
Hold on. I'm Jay Burling. I'm the Director of Web Applications at Hendrix College, and I like to live dangerously. Oh, dude, it screwed up. Hold on, wait.
All right.
Dang it.
All right, one more try. One more try.
No overlay selected. I think I've broken the Google Apps, y'all. Never mind. It'll just show up randomly.
All right. That's a rare talent, Jay. So, Kurt, let's start out because I know that a lot of people are not really familiar with MVC. Most of the Ektron clients are strictly web forms. So if we can just get a basic overview of MVC and then how that works with Ektron, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So I did put up this little diagram that was part of my Synergy presentation about what is MVC. And MVC is a design pattern. It's actually been around for a long time, like since the 70s. And it stands for Model View Controller. The model, you can think of that as the people, places, and things in your application. Sometimes this is called the domain or the object model, but it's kind of the nouns in your system. And then you have the controller, and the controller's job is to talk to the model, usually like a service layer or a repository pattern, to fetch data. And oftentimes the controller will put that data in a class that's a view model and pass that off to the view. Usually the view is a razor view in the Microsoft world, and ultimately what the view outputs is HTML. But you can imagine if you were building a REST-based application, maybe the view would output XML or JSON or something. So the view could be anything. This pattern's used quite a bit in the GUI software world as well as many web frameworks out online, outside of the Microsoft community especially. So it's a pretty powerful design pattern, and it lends itself well to separating out the different layers of your application. And that helps promote testability. It helps each layer work really well together, do its purpose well, and helps you avoid the spaghetti code and instead turns it into something like a cake with multiple layers.
Which is great imagery.
That's kind of my description of MVC.
Yeah, that's actually, I like the spaghetti versus cake analogy, and it's I did the Synergy side in MVC, and I thought that it was very helpful in that it kind of forced you to follow a good pattern in the way that you wrote your code. That you almost could not do spaghetti code using that pattern.
Right, especially if you really follow the single responsibility principles and get it really what MVC is really strong at, which is controlling the output very carefully.
All right, so we've got Jay's got the live dangerously graphic, finally.
I just ruined it. I'm sorry.
All right, so Kurt, let's switch back over to you, and so we got a very high-level overview of MVC. I would encourage anybody to go and learn more about it because it is a pretty good design pattern. So let's talk about MVC plus Ektron.
Sure. I think that MVC really actually fits pretty well with Ektron. You basically create a new MVC project, and then you use the Ektron API to pull in any piece of content that you want from Ektron. And I really enjoyed working with the Ektron API. All of the capabilities of Ektron seem to be exposed really nicely in the API. And so you basically end up building your own widgets rather than relying on the built-in ones that are built into Ektron. So of course, that comes with it sort of a set of disadvantages as well. You don't have any in-place editing for content updates, and I'll talk in a little bit about how we got around that. Probably the biggest one is that you can't take advantage of Ektron's page builder functionality. While all that data is there and available via the API, you don't have that fancy drag and drop view. You don't have all those widgets that are part of the page builder functionality that Ektron has. But that doesn't mean that you can't build your own. And so in our site, we have a series of smart forms that model the content that's displayed on our pages. And we have simple widgets like accordions and tabs that we've set up as smart forms. And then we wrote Razor View helpers to actually create those controls. And then, of course, we have controllers and that go out and talk to the Ektron API. You can kind of see that in the diagram here. Controllers go out, they talk to the Ektron API through a page service that we wrote, and they return to a view model, just like I was talking about before, which ultimately goes down to the Razor View. And then we happen to have a mobile layout and a desktop layout in that Razor View. But you can think of that view model as a series of smart forms for that model what's on the actual page.
What's cool about having those layers is that, can you bring that graphic back up? So basically, your Ektron page service is another library that you've written, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So your view model could be a representation of a smart form, or it could be anything really. It could be a third-party integration. Your model could be, what that really represents is this is what data you need for output in that Razor View. Yeah. So something that I think is cool is you could have multiple smart forms that feed into one model. So you could have a smart form for a press release and a smart form for an author, but your model combines those for output. But inside the system, they could be separate. And that's part of that logic that goes into what you're calling the Ektron page service, and everybody can name it what they like, is that all of the logic becomes separated from the display, which is what you really should be doing. As part of development, whether you're doing web forms or MVC, you should be separating that logic.
Exactly. And then the advantage to it, too, is the whole point with the controller is that you can, since you're building a specific view for a specific thing, you don't have to send all of the information that you would be sending for a generic class. You can send something extremely tight with just the information that you want displayed, which is good for security and page weight and everything else.
Right, and your model could even have its own logic within it. If you needed to override a toString or something like that, you can include that as part of your model. So Kenny has a question: does Ektron have anything in the pipeline to make MVC more a part of the core? So the way this is working, and Kurt, you can correct me if your instance is different, is this is basically a 3-tier implementation, where the third tier is communicating via some kind of service, what Ektron provides out of the box, or WCF services. You could certainly write your own WCF or RESTful APIs or whatever you wanted to use for this as part of your application. Web API, yep. But that's really the solution right now, and going forward. Kenny is using a 3-tier model where you've got MVC as your presentation tier, Ektron as the application, and then the database are your 3 tiers. That's the model that's going to be used to support MVC going forward as well as today.
And what about the kind of the hybrid solution, the running them both together in the same place? Because ASP.NET, Web Forms, and MVC are designed to run on the same stack. I know there's a little bit of a collision that you can have in a standard CMS 400 site with the router, is it the URL aliasing module?
The route config and the URL aliasing module.
Right.
So Kurt, you've got a solution for that, right? I saw that in the diagram, URL aliasing.
Yeah, we just wrote a pretty simple alias. We call it the alias MVC handler. That's actually what gets called from our route config, and it looks up the URL aliases using the Ektron API. We have a Ektron alias manager class that we wrote. It talks to the Ektron API, figures out what the current page is, maps that essentially to a content item in Ektron, and then that actually gets handed off to the page controller, and it actually goes out and fetches all the details about that page, and again assembles that view model. And the alias MVC handler is actually something we pretty much use almost the exact same code from the sample that's out on the Ektron Developer Center. They have a great sample that shows how to set up the alias MVC handling capability. And we took that, made some slight modifications to it, and that's what powers resolving those URL aliases for us.
So is that the sample that Derek Barca uploaded originally? That's
right.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't use Derek's solution for that. I used some of his ideas, but I was actually able to pull in the URL aliasing module out of the CMS 400 site and pull it over into my MVC site, and just had to make a few modifications inside it, but a generic route config was able to handle that for me, and I just had to have specific routes for things like the registration page, which was not represented by content within the CMS.
Right. So you could use protected routes, I suppose, in the URL alias module to keep MVC from getting short-circuited by the aliasing handler without converting the entire site over to MVC, which would let you have that kind of that hybrid approach to it.
Yeah, I've not done a hybrid approach. Kurt, have you?
No, we really don't do any web form stuff in-house, so we wouldn't have a situation where that'd be called for. It's kind of interesting.
I know that you can pull Razor into a web forms project, and I know that you can use web forms inside an MVC project, but I've just never found the need to mix the two. Razor syntax was pretty convenient to use in MVC. I think if I was going that route, I would do everything I could to stick with Razor unless I had a real strong need to not.
Well, I'm thinking of the situation that a lot of people would be in, which is that you already have a site built in web forms.
Sure.
You don't want to immediately ditch everything to go to a new model to start building over. I mean, in a situation where you're doing a clean install or you have the ability to greenfield your site, that would be an awesome way to do it. But there's a lot of advantages that you could gain from MVC, and there might even just be the slow conversion process of going from one to another and wanting to kind of test the waters before you jump in whole hog. And I think that's something that's pretty doable just from what we've talked about.
Yeah, I'd like to see a proof of concept of that if that's something that you guys are looking to do at all.
Maybe.
Yeah. Sounds like you've studied up on it.
We're kind of, everything's on the table right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think, I also look at that as whether you're doing web forms or Razor, it's just the output.
Right.
You would still have to rewrite a portion of the logic or import that over. Simply rewriting the output markup seems like a smaller task, but it depends on what you're doing, of course. But seems like if you're going to redo a lot of the logic or move over a lot of the logic anyway, why not go ahead and at least look into what it's going to take to convert most, if not all, of your output markup into Razor.
Ken actually had a comment, which he says he's in a meeting and so he's not watching, which is actually really the relevant portion of this conversation is Page Builder. Page Builder right now requires web forms to function.
It does.
You could have an entirely MVC site except for you want to have a couple pages that you use Page Builder on because you want to give them the flexibility to really go nuts and manage their own layouts with that. And I think that would be a good situation in which you would want to go with a hybrid approach. So for us, for instance, if we're using MVC for like a lot of our simple pages, just because we want to cut the page weight and just make it a little bit easier to use, that's awesome. But for our bigger, more complex pages like our home page, I absolutely don't want to switch away from Page Builder because that means I would have to get involved every single time we needed to move something around. Or develop my own drop zone framework, which is just something I'm not willing to do.
which is something I've done.
Yeah.
You have.
Yeah.
One of the things we looked at when we had a situation where the authors really wanted to use Page Builder, but we really wanted to present this using MVC, was to simply split the authoring environment from the production environment. So it was almost like developing two separate sites entirely, one for the authors and then one for the actual presentation. Now, the benefit there was that we didn't have to include the work area or anything else in the production site other than a web services layer that got us back to a place to get our data.
Right. Did you then have to build an interpretive layer for the reading the Page Builder layout?
Yeah, and what we did was we transformed it inside our model layer. So essentially, we created an object out of it that had all the properties in that layer, and that kept the production site really lightweight and really fast because we also implemented a little bit of persistence in there, so it wasn't always hitting that web services layer if it had something recent.
Yeah.
We did for our content editors, since we have a pretty fixed site templates. That's the other thing that made it easy for us not to use Page Builder. We have 4 different templates, and we don't want people moving stuff around all over the place on the page. We have that advantage, so to speak. So what we did for our editors is we just built a button in on the page when you're browsing our site, either on our live site or our staging server, and it just says edit this page in Ektron. It's down here when you're logged in as a staff person. And if they hit that button, it just links them out to the Ektron work area and takes them right to that content item, the smart form for that content item. So they're, while they don't have a WYSIWYG, editor right in page, they're able to quickly hit this button and get right into the Ektron work area to make updates to the page. And then likewise, they can switch back to the page and refresh it to preview their changes. And that happens, of course, on our staging server, not our live server.
So did you have any challenges or difficulties doing authentication of the users and then persisting that authentication on your MVC site and the work area as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's true that they do have to log in twice. They log in once on our website, an.com, and they're noticed as a staff member, and then they would have to log in again to access the work area, and that actually uses their Active Directory password. But the reason that's in place is mostly so that our site can pull some additional information back from them as staff. But yeah, that's a little bit of a pain point. I suppose it's not a one-click sign-on and you're signed into the work area and the website.
Right. So Matt Bodley says Web API is part of MVC for .NET, which is true, which ends up being a good reason to do a hybrid approach when Page Builder is required. And you definitely can create, say, a Web API project and insert that into your CMS 400 solution as well. So you can mix some MVC-based Web API stuff in with just a vanilla min site if you need to go that route.
Although you would have to be careful, again, like we talked about earlier with the URL aliasing module and creating some protected routes. But that's pretty easy to do. I think that there's some code out there that I think you developed that's really good for that. That was a subtle hint that your code is good.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Yeah. I don't remember what code that is, but other people remember my code better than I do.
There you go.
Which must mean it's good, right?
It is, right? And it works and does the problem. So yeah, I don't know. I think really the hybrid thing is something that we're looking at because we have a lot of pre-existing template stuff that we don't want to completely rediscover. But at the same time, we want to do some fun stuff like you guys do with Synergy, where you can develop out an entire thing with just front-end API where you don't have to do anything, except JavaScript and some CSS and some HTML5. And a service-oriented paged architecture for that is really easy to do when you can throw in a web API layer to just create your service on the fly and go with it.
Yeah, web API is pretty awesome. I think by default it returns XML, but I always try to switch that over to do JSON.
Yeah. It's pretty easy to fix. There's also a lot of really good NuGet packages out there for it. Like there's some Force stuff to do cross-site authorization, and there's an entire thing for authentication for doing OData and OAuth that is out there. I think it's using Katana. It's pretty wild, but yeah, there's a deep hole.
Yeah, NuGet's got a lot to explore. Just anyway. So Kurt, I do think that you would be able to do authentication, a single sign-on should be possible using Ektron. Once they log into MVC, they're automatically logged into the work area if they're in the right group, let's say. So it'll be something worth looking into. I'd like to know whether you're able to accomplish that or not. But where are you guys going next? What's next for the Association of Neurologists?
I think for us, we're looking at doing more personalization to the website. So looking at who's logged into the site and delivering them a more personalized experience. And we were looking at different attributes that we know about the person who's logged in, the type of member that they are, where they're at in their career as a neurologist, because a lot of our resources are tied to that. And then finally, what their interests are. So if they're interested in stroke, perhaps showing them a list of the most recent stroke articles that we have on our site. So that's kind of exciting to put that stuff together. It's also proved to be quite a challenge. We have an existing kind of pod over on the right-hand side of our screen that we kind of built a little content recommendation engine. But it's primarily used by the marketing folks right now to promote resources that we have. And we really need to expand it to reach all of our different scientific publications. And we have a publisher that publishes those scientific publications. We don't do that in-house. So we have a little bit of an integration challenge there. Basically, we need a nice search index that has all of the scholarly articles indexed by terms like stroke and epilepsy so that we can display the personalized experience.
Yeah, what are the facets, basically, for each of those articles? If they're not being tagged very well, then that's going to be a big challenge for you. So we've got a comment by Sean O'Brien. We were able to use the hybrid approach by adding code to URL Alias Manager to ignore URLs matching existing routes, which works great. And I would agree with that. It's one of the reasons that Alias Manager is there in the app code is that you can make modifications to it if you need to, and you can just say, if it's the example that I like to use is if it's a work area path, you can just say if the path contains work area, return, and you're just basically killing any further processing of that. Yeah, so Victor says, I have not had a chance to play with Ektron MVC, but is there a place I can go and download a base Ektron MVC project plus docs? I don't think there are a lot of docs outside of just Derek Barker's blog post about it, but there is a sample on the Ektron Developer Center. If one of you guys wants to go find that and post the link, that'd be great. Otherwise, I'll do that after we sign off. I'll make sure that the tweet goes out.
Tweet. Just put it in the chat window.
Yep, I've got that I'm throwing up in the group chat window. I'm not sure if everybody can see that, but these are the first one is the Dev Center article about MVC, and then the second link is the actual sample code that you can download.
All right, so I'm going to both of those links now. Thanks, Kurt.
Beautiful.
So, Victor, look for that tweet. That should be coming at you pretty soon. So, Jay, are they bombing your office?
No, it's always something, isn't it?
It is.
I don't know what's going on. If I go dark all of a sudden, just know that I enjoyed this.
Yeah. It was a pleasure working with you, Jay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was.
So let's summarize a little bit. There are reasons to not go with MVC, especially if you're wanting to be heavily involved in Page Builder. If you're wanting to write those widgets, there are ways to go about taking that Page Builder XML as Brad described and still creating an output for that. But it's going to be a challenge. You're going to have to write additional layers for it. And when you go with a three-tier model, regardless, you're going to lose the ability to do targeted content and multivariate testing as part of Page Builder, even if you do build a lot of that additional layering. Those widgets just simply don't work in a three-tier configuration, at least not at this time. And those, I would look for those to be future improvements. I don't know whether that'll happen or not, but I think everybody would like to see it or see something along those lines, whether it's an update to those widgets or something else. But you're definitely going to lose some of that functionality. You're going to lose the in-context editing without going through a lot of extra work. So it's not something to just jump into and kind of force upon your authors. You want to have that conversation and figure out whether it's going to work for everybody who's a stakeholder in the site. So any other thoughts, you guys?
Looks like we got a request for your slide deck, Kurt.
Absolutely, it's up on the Synergy website. I don't know if they make those publicly available. I certainly don't have a problem with it if you distribute to everybody.
Hey, did the video ever get up there of our glorious office hours?
James is on a 45-second delay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's hooked up with Dustin's.
Yeah, a little bit.
I want him to laugh randomly. Go.
Sorry, guys. Random VPN issue. Sorry about that.
Glorious.
That was perfect timing.
It was, wasn't it? Oh man.
Well, my last thoughts on MVC is there's a lot of power in it. There's a lot of the routing alone gives you a lot of power. The multiple tiers, 3 tiers. We've been building in multiple tiers for a long time anyway. But MVC, like you said, it forces you to actually obey the rules and actually do it right. But the big benefit is we have clients that just simply don't want input in their production environment of any kind. They wanted output only. And by splitting it, having a separate authoring environment from production, and you really can tighten down that production site, really make it perform well with MVC, and add that level of security that you wouldn't have if you were just putting a web form site on top of the CMS.
Yeah, 3-tier of any kind, whether it's MVC or web forms, is going to provide that additional layer of security, and that's really what security is all about, is adding layers that people have to get through in order to try to attack you. So we do have a question. I noticed Ektron 9.1 includes references to MVC. Are there any plans to add HTML helper extensions or other goodies into the core product? I'm not familiar with those references, to be honest, and as far as I know, those extensions are not planned at this time. That doesn't mean that they're off the table necessarily, but I'm not aware of any plans right now. It's a good question. I'd be interested in knowing what those references are and what they're being used for. It may just be simply some web API stuff that we've put into the product or are putting into the product. I know that something like the CMP was developed as a separate project that gets put into a min site. So it's not like the starter sites of old. It's a completely different style of project. And so if that's what you're looking at in 9.1, that may be what you're seeing with those references.
Awesome.
All right. So we're at the half-hour mark. I think this was a good one. It's definitely it's an interesting technology. It has been around for a while, but I think it's gaining prominence over the last few years.
I think that you're right. I think it's definitely it will succeed ASP.NET Web Forms in some manner in the next coming years. It's just to the point where people want that level of control over the output. View state's out of control. There's a lot of overhead from web forms that was just kind of hangover from people developing Windows applications, and we're beyond that now.
You mean the view state?
Hey.
Yes, the view state. Disable that view state on all of your controls that you can.
Whenever possible.
Whenever possible. So it's basically doubling your page size if you don't.
Yeah.
All right, so I appreciate your time, Kurt. Thanks very much for joining. Hopefully, we'll have you on again,
Oh, thanks.
future episodes. Whether we're talking about MVC or not, you've kind of broken the ice, so you're going to get the invitation from this point on.
Absolutely. It's
All
great. Great. Thank you for the opportunity. It's fun.
No, I'm always happy to have a client show off. So if anybody else wants to jump on to Office Hours and show off the good work you're doing with Ektron, just drop me a line on Twitter or send me an email, james.stout@ektron.com. I'm pretty easy to find. Jay and Brad, as always, thanks for joining. Always good to have you.
Great
Thanks
to
for
be
having
here.
us.
And with that, we'll see everybody next week. Thanks.